Last Picture Show with Rahim Khan, and I am reviewing Masters of the Universe. Whenever you are reviewing films like this that have an original, it's hard not to compare them to those films, but I shall try to avoid that and judge this film on its own merit. And where does its merit stand? Like well below 50%. I didn't like this movie, I'll be honest. I know fans and critics have been, well, let's first address the critics. The reviews have been kind of all over the place. Some are warming up to it and saying sort of it's a fun, dumb, stupid sort of like, adaptation that brings the franchise into what is this, the 2020s. Others are saying it's pretty bad. The box office, it's interesting. The box office is kind of middling so far. So far, I think these are, yeah, this was updated like, yesterday or something like that. So over the past 2 or 3 days, it's made $54 million of a budget of around maybe 200 million. So let's see. Apparently, thanks to the horror revival, well, not even the horror revival, but just like this horror revolution that's going on with films like Obsession and Backrooms and stuff like that, the films are having a tough time. But we shall see if this movie gets a sequel. I'll talk about that in a second. Okay. I think you all know how I feel about the original. I did a recommends on that recently. It's up for you guys to watch. I feel very strongly about that, and I think I laid out sort of point wise why I think that movie was so good. Why do I think this movie isn't good? Before that, very, very quickly, so I can spare you guys watching like me go on about this for the next 15 minutes. Should you watch this in the cinema? Should you stream it or should you skip it? Seeing as how you can't stream it, you have the options between cinema or skipping it. And very frankly, I think for me, it's going to be a hard pass, even though I did watch it. But I feel you guys can have a much better time at the cinema watching something else because for some reason or the other, while I think the filmmakers' hearts were in the right place, um, something about this just doesn't come together. And I'm not going to use this as like sort of a metaphor to explain the rest of the movie, but the first time when I saw James Purfoy playing Randor, that is, of course, Prince Adam's father, the entire look of him just looked fake. The hair and makeup, the costume, even his lines. There was some like perfidy about it. There was something that just didn't feel genuine or real. And you often get that in movies that sort of deal with sort of mythology or fantasy sci-fi, where it just doesn't feel like this world is lived in. It feels like it was only made for the purpose of this movie, quite literally. But whereas when you watch a movie like Dune, of course, I'm not comparing this movie to that, or Lord of the Rings, no comparison there either. But when you look at those movies and the world building that they've done, they feel like real. They feel like you can reach out and touch them and like, that they're lived in. It is an experience. There is history. There is thought. A lot of that has gone into making this. I didn't feel that with with this movie. Sure, you may think that I'm sort of ascribing um, a level of maybe maturity to this movie or a level of seriousness to it that it does not deserve. After all, this is based on the original, like, the OG animated series, which was, I mean, it is what it is. Him wearing his white, his, that white top that clings to his body and the pink shirt and sort of the horrible hair and all of that stuff. Or is it a pink vest? Regardless, I get that, but when you try and sort of like, okay, so there's this other scene again with Randor where, I mean, sort of he has to protect his family against, Skeletor and stuff like that. And he kind of delivers a speech and like, oh, save yourself, Adam, blah, blah, this, blah, blah, that. It's just like, James Purfoy is a good actor, right? He has presence, great accent. But there's just came off as so artificial. And that's what I felt to a very large extent about the production design, about the CGI. I mean, you get that with Cringer. It's just, I mean, again, I wanted to avoid comparisons to the original movie. But whereas that movie felt like, Skeletor's face was like molded onto Langella's, and it kind of felt like, yeah, this is like the mutant half brother or brother of Randor. In this, it's just like, despite, the leaps and bounds we've made in technology, it didn't work for me. Okay. Again, I said I was going to avoid comparisons to the original, but it feels like the screenwriters, in this case, they are what are the names? Chris Butler, Aaron and Adam Nee, and David Callahan couldn't avoid kind of taking the plot of the original. Because in the original, as in this, you're introduced to Eternia by way of monologue. In the first, it's like sort of a nameless narrator. In this, it's Prince Adam himself. And we are, quickly introduced to the sorceress, Castle Grayskull, the power, the sword of power, all of that stuff, and this wonderful magical planet that is Eternia. Somehow, and of course, we will never be able to live that down thanks to Star Wars. Somehow, Palpatine came back. Somehow, the forces of Snake Mountain and Skeletor are able to breach Eternia's defenses, take over the capital city Eternos, and the family is on the run. Very much to the very similar to the first. Prince Adam is sent to Earth with the Sword of Power, and that initially sets up your like in the basic premise of this movie. And of course, I mean, sort of like, logically from that, I'm trying to avoid spoilers here. You're going to have to get back to Eternia to save the day. That's the basic plot. So it doesn't reinvent the wheel. It doesn't really do anything other than retread familiar ground. But okay, cool, whatever. Uh, the film did not deserve or in any way justify its 2.5 hour runtime. No way. There were points at which I was bored. There were points at which I was desperate for the movie to end, simply because you don't need to have a movie that instantly sort of feels epic. I can understand, like, you're like, okay, this is He-Man. It's going to be big. There's going to be action scenes. There's going to be emotion. There's going to be all of this stuff. But, you know, it could have easily be cut down to like an hour 45. And I think the runtime got on my nerves to such an extent that I didn't stick around. And yes, there are two post-credit scenes. I did see the one with Orko. I did not see the one that I had no idea Prince Adam has a long-lost sister and a potential setup for a sequel with the return of course, Skeletor himself. Casting. I will give it to Nicholas Galitzine, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, as both Prince Adam and He-Man himself. I think he's a far more convincing Prince Adam because, they are playing up the humor in this movie. I mean, there's a lot more to it than I would say maybe even in the original, which is cool. I appreciate that. And I think he does a really good job, a convincing Hulk who, sort of not even moonlights. I mean, his day job is as a HR professional. So I like that. And I like that whole angle of him trying to be less the warrior and more the peacemaker. I like that. As a he sure has the physicality, but I didn't feel like the kind of presence that Dolph Lundgren had as He-Man. And I'm so glad that they paid homage to him with his cameo and maybe even hints that he could have been one of the champions. I mean, there's a brief shot of that sort of those statues of the champions. I think one of them kind of looked like him. And of course, he does the whole good journey part. That was good too. I liked it. Jared Leto as Skeletor. Now, this is entirely CGI. You never see Leto himself. You, of course, hear his voice. And I couldn't help but feel that he sounded so much like Jermaine Clement from Flight of the Concords that maybe they could have just hired that guy out and saved like a couple of million. Not to say that Leto doesn't do a good job. I mean, I like he's leaning into the aspects that we know of Skeletor, that he is a little camp. He's kind of funny. And even though most of the, you blundering buffoon or you dundering dimwit, those kind of double insults he does, some of them don't land as much. Um, Maybe because Leto was kind of out of breath, I'm not sure. But it was okay. Wasn't great, but wasn't as bad as people made out to be. I don't know why people don't like this guy. I mean, sure, it was like I didn't like him in Troy, not Troy, what was it called, in Tron. It wasn't his fault. The movie was shit. Otherwise, man, I remember this guy and thing. Remember Blade Runner 2049? He was fantastic. The other person that I think I will comment on and then move on, from the casting, to script and direction is Idris Elba as Duncan Man at Arms. I liked, it's Idris, man. You gotta like the guy. He's always pretty good. And in this, totally, a okay with the guy. Um, I like how he goes from like sort of this arrogant, self-assured man at arms to like this broken drunkard who then finds himself again. But a okay on that too. I liked it. Okay, the script again. I feel that we were covering the same ground we already did in the first movie. Thankfully, in this, we're not as much on Earth as we are in Eternia, which I liked. But I still feel that sort of in that arc that we do usually have of a hero's journey, um, it was just kind of like expected. All of it was expected, was typical, was cliche. We knew that these were sort of, the sort of ebbs and flows that the story was going to take. There was nothing sort of new here. There was nothing, I would say, even exciting in terms of like, the characters, the quips, the tension, the action. There's nothing new in this movie. I feel that much like the maybe potential inspiration that Dan Pemberton, who did the score on this movie, might have taken from Queen, who were featured on the soundtrack, but then also like Flash Gordon and all of that stuff. I wish they had kind of run with like doing an updated kind of like sort of heavy metal take on this show, on this show into this movie, rather than sort of like, a live action cartoonish kind of thing, which has far too many sexual innuendos. But I do appreciate the joke of how, the characters' names, like Fisto and Ram Man, aren't the concoction of like an adult writer's room, but in this case, the imagination of a 10-year-old child who's trying to sort of remember his past. I really like that. I also liked Skeletor showing up as looks as an office worker or somebody in the gym, pumping iron. That was also a funny bit. I appreciate it. Travis Knight, who's the director. I really like Travis Knight because, he is like a studio. He is the director of Paranorman and, Kubo and the Two Strings. So those movies are really good. I also didn't mind his Bumblebee, compared to the kind of shit that what was his Michael Bay was putting out. For some reason or the other, I don't know. It wasn't working for me, this movie. I mean, I was less amused and more irritated by it, which is a shame because, as I said when I was talking about the original one, I think He-Man has been safe because we've only gotten one movie and countless cartoon adaptations, but only one movie. It's been safe from like, the plunder that is the reboot, right? The effect that reboots have on franchises and how they never stick the landing. It's been safe from that. But here we have this. Um And I will say that, you know, it's a missed opportunity. It's just a film that I had really hoped would have maybe, you know, done more, explored more. I don't know, but sorry, guys. I mean, I'm not going to be recommending this one to anyone anytime soon. If it does come on streaming, give it a go. But otherwise, whatever. Okay. I am glad that just one last thing, of course, because this is like a post-credit thing. I am so glad that while okay, they kind of skipped Orko out um, in the rest of the movie, he is there and sort of doing his moral of the story type thing. That was really cool. Uh, but Orko is a really good character. I love what they did with him in Masters of the Universe Revelations, Kevin Smith. I remember he has this fantastic moment I'm not sure if it was season one or two, where egged on by Eva Lynn. And I'm sorry I didn't even mention Alison Brie as Eva Lynn. I didn't like her too much, even though I like Alison Brie. But there's just something too like cackly about her. Um, Nothing like Meg Foster in the original. Right. Orko had this fantastic moment where he sacrifices himself for his friends, and that was so cool. And that actually showed that Orko isn't like this bumbling wizard. He's actually has a lot of potential, right? And one last thing, sorry, that one that they used to do in the cartoon where like sort of standing akimbo they would lean back and laugh. They have that moment in this movie and it's really funny because it makes no goddamn sense whatsoever. I don't know who came up with that. Who's ever seen anyone laugh like that? I don't know, but I'm glad they had that sort of like, deep cut. That's Masters of the Universe.